In tonight's Dateline Defense, Syria Negotiated. Next month, diplomats will meet in Geneva to press ahead with talks aimed at ending Syria's civil war. The conflict has stretched into its 5th year. 250,000 people have been killed and millions more have been displaced. The international community wants to find a political settlement, but they're still divided on the future of Syrian President Bashar Assad. Joining me with the latest is retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He's a decorated combat veteran, author, PhD, and executive vice president of the Burke-Macgregor Group. Doug, there are a lot of players at the table here. The list includes the U.S., UK, France, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia. Who wants what out of the Geneva meeting?
Well, the key issue here, I think, is that the various participants, particularly the Turks, the Saudis, have discovered that they're not going to get everything they wanted. All of this really began at the instigation of Saudi Arabia and Turkey, our alleged friends. They wanted to eliminate Mr. Assad permanently and replace him with effectively a Sunni Islamist puppet that they could control. And that would be a game changer strategically also for Israel. Israel then would share a border with a permanently hostile state. This isn't going to happen, and that's the real message thus far from the negotiations. This is not going to be an easy solution, but it's very clear that there will be a division of the country and that the Shiites, Christians, Druze, and others will end up in a state of their own.
Well, so what's the most likely outcome for Assad?
I think Assad is going to remain, at least initially, probably for some period of time that satisfies Russian interests to ensure that this new state that emerges, or multiple states that emerge, is stable, and then he will simply disappear and retire to some resort on the Mediterranean, I suspect.
Now, meanwhile, the U.S. has seen some recent successes and setbacks in the Middle East. Let's start with Afghanistan. Yesterday, a Taliban suicide bombing killed 6 service members in Helmand province. What's happening on the ground there, Doug?
Well, there are a number of things that don't get much play in the media that your listeners should understand. The Taliban as a monolithic entity was never very strong and unified to begin with. It's now fragmented. So you have various elements of this so-called Taliban led by clerics associated with specific tribes and groups of tribes that are striking out on their own. At the same time, India is very heavily involved in Kabul, particularly with the Kabul government and its military. India is prepared to make enormous investments, if you will, with arms and equipment in the Afghan army. So Afghanistan is moving to the center of this Hindu-Muslim competition across the region.
That is a game changer. It sounds like, although they still have fighting season, the Taliban, they still have a fighting season, just like we have hunting season out here, right?
That's one way to look at it, yeah.
All right, currently there are 9,800 U.S. troops in the country, down from 140,000 at the peak of combat operations in 2011 in Afghanistan. How should the U.S. adapt to this changing security environment?
You know, I don't think there's any appetite to do much more than we have.
No.
It strikes me that the government decided to keep these few forces there, essentially to reduce the criticism that might be leveled at the government during the election campaign. I think the best thing they can do is stay out of harm's way and get out.
Now, to the west, Iraqi forces have stormed the center of Ramadi. It's been a stronghold for Islamic State terrorists for several months now. Will Iraq be able to hold that strategically important city, Doug?
You know, we can't tell at this point. Clearly, the people who are most effective on the ground are the people we dislike the most, the Shiite militias and the Iranians. The Iraqi army hasn't been very successful, as I think your viewers know. And this is an Iraqi army operation that depends very heavily on our airstrikes. And by the way, I'm sure your viewers are also aware that this Iraqi army has decided to operate without any significant assistance from us on the ground. So it's just not clear at this point. Will they be successful in Ramadi? Will they take the government center? They could. We'll have to wait and see. But Mosul, a much larger city to the north, over 640,000 people, is the big enchilada. We haven't even begun to go after that.
All right, so they want to go it alone. They don't really want us, but the government does want additional air support, but not additional ground support, as you mentioned. Is this the right move?
Well, I don't think the government has much choice. If they were to say, sure, come on in and join us, they'd be overthrown. They'd be overthrown from within Iraq. People think that the Sunnis are on the verge of overwhelming the Shiite South. That's never been the case. Iran calls the tune in the South, and the Shiites that are most powerful politically in Baghdad are closely allied with Tehran. So they can't possibly allow us to come in there without putting themselves at risk. One would hope that we would notice this and begin scaling back our commitment in that country. Let the Iranians and the Russians defend it. We don't need to do it.
Let's only hope for better news. In 2016, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, Executive Vice President of the Burke-Macgregor Group. Doug, happy holidays to you.
Hey, same to you.